Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, each week here at MMA Junkie. We take a spin through the biggest topics in the sport. This week, we've got Matthew Wells from the great state of Texas, Nolan King from out in Boston, and gorgeous George Garcia from right here in Las Vegas with me. So let's just jump into it. Guys, heading into this past weekend's UFC 270 event, it seemed all the talk on the night's main event centered around Francis Ngannou's frustration with his UFC contract. And unfortunately, that didn't change much afterward, with UFC President Dana White declining to wrap the belt around Ngannou's waist following his decision win, and also declining to attend the night's post-fight press conference. So my question to you now is, what do you expect to see happen now? And is there a best-case scenario for how this whole thing plays out? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, you get it started.
Well, I don't know how it's going to play out exactly, but if I'm on the UFC side, I want to figure this whole thing out as quickly as possible, because you have Francis Ngannou, who's pretty much turning into this dominant champion now, where he's going out there and improving each time out. The past two fights, look, we saw new patience from him. This fight, we saw a wrestling game that we haven't seen. We saw some slick jiu-jitsu, some sweeps off the back. The guy's improving, and he's taking out all the guys that you would think would be in line for a title shot in the near future. So unless if they just plan on blowing this whole thing up and then hitting the reset button on the heavyweight division, you got to figure this out with Francis. You got to do it. I mean, this is a good guy. He represents Africa. He represents, the whole European side of the globe really right now as well, with the France connection too. So this is a guy who represents not only himself, but the division well, the entire sport as well. Like, he's got a solid fan base. I mean, why would you not want to get this guy, in the forefront of the company right now? And just the fact that he also went out there and fought injured too, like, these are the type of guys that Dana usually hypes up. So you need to figure it out quickly.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because it wasn't the most entertaining fight we've seen of all time, but there certainly was drama in there. There certainly was tension in there, and Francis certainly did show us some new wrinkles, but it just seems like these parties are so far apart right now. So, Nolan, what do you think? Is there a positive resolution in this, or how's this thing going to play out?
I hope so, but obviously Dana White not being there at the press conference, not wrapping the belt around Francis Ngannou's waist, makes me a little, less optimistic. I mean, think about how many absolutely boring, terrible title fights we've sat through the years, and Dana still has the respect to get in there and put the belt around the champion. We've seen a lot worse fights than Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. So obviously that's not a good sign when it comes to negotiations. In terms of Francis, what he wants to do next, obviously he wants to do boxing at some point. It seems like that's something that's always been a real goal for him. He's closer than ever to being able to kind of have that name, the build, in order to take on a big boxing star in a crossover fight. But I'm not sure right now is the time to do it. I mean, there's so many big fights for him to take in MMA. I mean, if it's the John Jones fight or the Stipe Miocic trilogy, I feel like there's a few things that need to get figured out before he takes that jump. So maybe that's something that can be worked into the negotiations. But fingers crossed, I really, really hope that these two parties can come together, because Francis showed us a lot. Like Matt said, he showed us a lot on Saturday that we hadn't seen with some knee injuries. So for me, I want to see Francis Ngannou inside the cage. I know a lot of fight fans do. Hopefully things can get done at the negotiating table, but it might be a long negotiation before we see him back.
I guess the bright side is he's going to be out for a little while with this injury, right? So maybe there's some time to work through these negotiations. But George, what do you think? Because, I mean, he made it very clear at that post-fight press conference, this isn't just about money. So how do we get this thing worked out? What else is on the table?
It's going to boil down to, I love what Matt Wells said, get it done quickly. We have to figure it out quickly, which direction you're going to head in. He's either going to have to get a great raise, but no boxing, because there's some great fights on the horizon, or a raise, and then they're going to have to maybe figure out how this thing's just going to end after a few fights, and then let the man go box. But it definitely is worthy of a raise. That was an incredible performance with that bad knee that he had. One of the doctors was telling him maybe you shouldn't even fight at all. And I thought usually those are the gutsy performances that Dana White likes. And one other thing, him not showing up to the press conference, I can live with that. I've seen times where he hasn't done it before, but not putting the belt around his waist, shameful. Grow the fuck up, Dana White. Seriously. I've seen Pete Rozelle hand that trophy to Al Davis, and they hated each other. 3 Super Bowls he did that. Robert Kraft and Roger Goodell, they put their feelings aside and they got it done, because that's a big stage. That's your stage, and you got to respect it.
Man, strong words, but I just hope they can get this thing worked out. I'm not feeling good about this at all, if I'm being honest with you. It just feels like we're in a place where these two sides don't even want to work together. And I know Ngannou wants to box, and if he wants to, that's great, if that's his biggest paycheck. But I guess I'm being selfish, man. I want to see him in the cage. I want to see him competing in MMA fights. So let's see. I hope they can bring these together because, again, I just don't think boxing would be competitive. So fingers crossed, guys. We'll see how it plays out. Well, the co-main event at UFC 270 was awarded the night's fight of the night with Davison Figueiredo earning back the UFC flyweight title with a razor-thin decision win over Brandon Moreno. Now, these guys have fought 3 times in 13 months, and incredibly, they are 1-1-1 at this point. Now, I'm not sure anyone could tell you who the better fighter really is at this point. So my question is, what now? Do we book the 4th fight immediately? Or is that unfair because you've got some legitimate contenders like Askar Askarov, like Kai France? I mean, how should this situation play out? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, let us go.
I tweeted this on Fight Night before the decision was read, and for me, I mean, you could automatic rematch this 100 times and I wouldn't complain. But I think obviously when you see it and it's 1-1-1, like do it again. I know Askar Askarov and Kai France might not love that. But, I mean, we've seen fighters wait a lot longer than a year for a title shot. Those 2 guys are going to fight coming up here in March. So, would probably be looking at, if you were to do the math, probably around March of 2023, that whoever wins that fight would fight the champion should they rematch Figueiredo and Moreno rematch immediately. So I don't think it's that crazy. It's not ideal for those guys. But I think right now you got to strike when the kettle's hot. That's a big fight. That's a fight fans want to see again. There are some questions. Brandon Moreno felt like he won. Some people thought Brandon Moreno won as well. I don't want to call it a controversial decision. I scored it for Davison Figueiredo, but there is some discussion there. And I think our colleague, Mike Bond, he tweeted something. I don't want to give him too much credit because his head will get bigger than it already is, but he tweeted something very true. We've watched these guys fight over the span of 15 rounds of fighting, and we still don't really know who's definitively the better fighter. So the UFC's never done it before, but this is the time to book a 4th fight between the same 2 fighters. I'm just here for it. I think we could book these guys, like I said, 100 times, and we would walk away excited from each one.
Yeah, well stated there. Passionate plea. Askar Askarov and Kai France would like to have a word with you, Nolan King. I'll set that up later on. George, what do you think? I mean, can we go number 4 right away, or are we treating those contenders badly?
Look, I mean, obviously, if we're stuck with having to watch them for a 4th time, who am I to argue with that? And they've been great fights. I really have loved this trilogy. But I love it when a division has a chance to breathe. There's also, aside from Kai France and Askar Askarov, it's a huge fight. Alexander Pantova, he had a great case when Brandon Moreno was champ. All of a sudden, that kind of went away. But I was thinking, as Nolan King was talking and going back to the last question, how about them as the co-main event of John Jones and Francis Ngannou at Allegiant Stadium? You do that? You make that one happen, I am all in. I will see that because I think it's going to be too soon for them to run it back in May. I mean, maybe not. They did it in 3 weeks, right? But if we're going to draw to a conclusion, then let's get it done early. Otherwise, let it breathe and let's come up with a bunch of other possibilities for each fighter. Let's be fair to the other fighters that are just as talented. But, those are the few exceptions. Either get it done in Brazil quickly or a stadium show, an international fight week, and make that the co-main event.
It's interesting because you talk about what fighters deserve, then you also talk about marketing as well. I do wonder, is there any possibility there might be some fatigue from fans? Like, do they want to pay for the matchup again? They have seen it 3 times already. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that plays into it all. Matt, what do you think? Should we go right away for the 4th time?
Hearing the reaction from the crowd makes me want to say that, running it back is probably the best option because I've never heard a flyweight, no matter who it was, get that sort of reaction when they hit the tunnel like Brandon Moreno got. Yeah, it was a home game for him essentially, but just the fact that the fans are so engaged with this division and this matchup right now wants me to say, yeah, go ahead and do it. Let's see that 4th one ASAP. But also, I like the idea of letting these guys face other competitors in the meantime. Let's get at least one more fight in. Like, that's my personal preference. I would want to see one more fight. If they both go out there and get wins, then the anticipation just grows even more. I definitely do want to see a 4th fight, but I think it would be better to get one fight in between. Let's let these guys focus on preparing for a different opponent because, I mean, they've got to be a little bit tired of, game planning for the same guy over and over and over again. So let's keep these guys fresh. Let's keep their minds working. with a fresh opponent. And then after they both get one win each, let's run it back then.
That's interesting. That's a part I hadn't thought of it. Maybe those two guys are like, just give me a break a little bit. Like, we'll do it again down the line, but I want to fight somebody else. It's tough, right? I mean, I personally, I think I'd like to see it again right now. I know that's tough for the rest of the contenders. I think if Mexico or Brazil are options, then you kind of have to go with it at that point, right? Like, you got to get it done. But it always bothers me and worries me a little bit, right? It's such a great rivalry. If you let them fight other people, who knows what happens down the road? Maybe it never works out that they come back together. I just feel like we need to see the conclusion of this. So we'll see how the schedule plays out. I'm kind of for it, I think. There's one last question from UFC 270. It's for future bragging rights among the panel right here. Now, this card features an astounding 8 different athletes making their octagon debut. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. After just one performance in the octagon, pick one of the 8 and tell me why you think they will be a UFC champion at some point in their career. George, we'll put 4 minutes on the clock and let you get it started.
Boy, that Michael Morales was impressive. And it wasn't just the finish. It wasn't just, him gutting through to get his hand raised. He's only 22, and you could just see it in his face. He had this innocent look of someone like, I'm just kind of getting started. Like, there's so much to mold with this young guy. I can't wait to see his progression of how much better he can get. And, he's got a huge ceiling. And then, as you've seen, there's certain countries that really, really gravitate towards their sports stars, especially their combat sports stars. And I love how Ecuador's embraced Chito Vera. Maybe not on the level of Ireland and their boxers and MMA fighters, or Mexico or whatever. Still, there's something there. There's something that reminds me of the way Argentina's back their boxers as well, if you follow boxing. But yeah, this guy just seems to be like a prodigy. You know what I mean? And I like I said, I was just impressed with how athletic he is, how explosive he is. But more than anything, he just had this look of, I'm just a baby. I'm just getting started. And I can't wait to see how good he is at 26. But I wouldn't be shocked if he was a world champion in 2 years.
Yeah, the guy's got time on his side, right? He looked fantastic, so relaxed. Look, was tested a little bit. You like to see that, right? I mean, it's not like he just actually steamrolled somebody, but actually got out of a bad situation as well. A lot of great things to look at there. Matt, another name on that list that stands out to you?
Yeah, there's another one on the list. And I mean, it's going to be a long shot. And he was a long shot to even win at this event. But he's a veteran, but I liked what I saw from him. So give me Victor Henry since my first pick was already taken. I'll go this way. The guy showed a lot of poise, a big stage. He was a massive underdog. He didn't really care. He went out there and did his thing. And this is a guy with a lot of experience from other organizations as well. He's done his thing over in Ryzen. Like he was saying in his post-fight interview, he's like, I told y'all, like, I know what I am. I've got experience. I can do this, at a very high level. So it would be a long shot to get it done in the bantamweight division, but I think he's a guy that can make some noise in the near future for sure.
I like it, man. It's a little bit outside of the box, but what a story that would be, right? I mean, an absolute character, as you said. He's got something about him that just kind of draws you to him. Phenomenal fight, man. I thought that was a very, very entertaining matchup against a very, very tough guy. And to step in against somebody like that on short notice, again, with all the experience. I mean, it was a great story. A long shot, but a story that I would absolutely sign up for. So we'll see if that one plays out. Nolan, I'll turn it over to you for a last one. Who do you think could be a UFC champion?
Yeah, obviously great points by both George and Matt. I think Michael Morales, his age, his ability to come back in that fight was great. Victor Henry, his experience level, fighting a tough guy in his debut and looking so good. Those are both good picks. But for me, I'm going to go with Jack Della Maddalena. I think he's somebody, I had heard about for quite some time. The people in the Australian, New Zealand regional scene had been hyping him up. He's going to be the real deal. And sometimes with that scene, it's tough to tell, just because there are only a handful of regional shows out there. And it's tough, especially now during the pandemic, to have these guys get matched up. That scene has been wiped. So you don't really know what you're going to get a lot of times. I'd heard really good things. He had struggled to get fights. UFC finally signs him, or he goes on Contender Series. He looked great. Coming into his debut, I don't think that it could have gone much better than that. I know, obviously, the level of competition there, no offense to his opponent, probably should have been fighting at a lower weight class. I just think the size was too much there. But I liked what I saw out of Jack Della regardless from him. I think his skills are sharp. I think his boxing's great. Obviously, training with some good guys over there in his part of the world. And I think he's going to be the next one from that region to kind of, march up the ladder, put on exciting fights and kind of get into that contendership. And like the question asked here, could he be a champion? I think time will tell, but I like what I see.
Yeah, great point there. You always wonder those regional standouts. Are they going to deliver? You hear the local crowd getting behind him, but Jack Della Maddalena absolutely impressed me as well. Hey, I'll throw one more name at you. I don't know if he'll be a UFC champion, but he's going to win some fights and be exciting. Andre Fiallo, I thought, came in on short notice and impressed as well, man. But Michael Morales, Jack Della Maddalena, great shouts. And, hey, man, sign me up on the Victor Henry bandwagon as well. We got Bellator 273 is this week in Arizona, and a pair of veteran stars, both of them 38 years old at this point, have some incredibly tough matchups on their hand, with heavyweight champ Ryan Bader unifying the title with interim champ Valentin Moldavsky, and former UFC and WEC champ Benson Henderson taking on a very tough Islam Mamedov. So who's got more at stake here on this card? And the kind of the twilights of their career are reputations and careers potentially hanging in the balance for either man. Who's facing the bigger test here? We'll put 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, get us started.
It's for me, it's definitely Ryan Bader. This is a guy who obviously he has hardware to lose, for one. So he's definitely got more tangible assets to lose. And for the fact that he's also coming off of that first round loss to Corey Anderson, he's got a lot to prove in this one. A championship fighter in Bellator. He was the guy that couldn't quite reach that level in the UFC. But hey, he reinvented himself in Bellator, claimed that gold. And now you're starting to hit these bumps in the road. You lose to Nemkov, you lose to Corey Anderson. Now you've got the title unification bout against the interim champ. You have to get this done if you're hoping to, continue this sort of like reinvented legacy in Bellator with you as a championship level fighter. So he definitely has more to lose than Benson Henderson. I think Benson's legacy has already been set, considering, his prime of his career was in the UFC where he was a champion, versus Ryan Bader, who kind of built that part of his career in Bellator. So if he wants to keep this thing going and really prove that, yeah, I hit another level here in Bellator, he's got to win this fight. Versus Benson, yeah, we all know what he is at this point. He's still a fan favorite. I don't think he needs any more accolades as far as championships go. But for Ryan Bader, he's got to get this one done.
Yeah, some great points there, right? Like, obviously, if you hand away a title, you lost, an absolute loss. But, I kind of wonder, like, Ryan Bader, as a heavyweight, it seems like you got more options, right? The talent pool is a little bit thinner. It seems like you can fight later on into your career. So for that reason, I wonder, even with Benson's legacy secure, if maybe that factors into what he's got on the table here. Nolan, what do you think? Which guy has more at stake here?
Yeah, I think it's definitely Ryan Bader. And it's funny, right? Because I think the reason Benson Henderson has less to lose here is he's kind of had a slow taper, right? Like, we've seen him lose a few times here and there, but he's always been competitive. I mean, with the exception of the Michael Chandler fight where he got finished pretty quickly, all of his fights recently, he hangs in there. Brent Primus had a good performance against him, but Primus is a top contender. So it's kind of been a slow drop off for Benson. Whereas Ryan Bader, I feel like, the times that we've seen him lose, when he lost his light heavyweight title, obviously, that was pretty violent, pretty brutal beatdown, a lot of strikes absorbed there. When he lost to Corey Anderson, the same thing. I mean, that was so quick, devastating in front of his hometown crowd. So for me, I think for Bader to go out there on Saturday and lose again, I think it's just, these really sharp, depending on how this fight plays out, it could be a really sharp drop off yet again. So for me, I think Ryan Bader has more to lose here. Benson Henderson can still compete in this division, even if he gets taken down and laid on by Islam Mamedov in this fight, who is phenomenal at doing that, by the way. I know it's maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing, but he's a really, really, really great wrestler if you guys haven't seen him fight. So yeah, I think both men have a certain amount on the line, but Bader needs a win. He needs to prove that, he can still compete in these divisions and hold his title. I mean, he's got a title on the line. So what's bigger than that?
Time waits for no man, right? It's crazy. We've been covering these guys' careers for a long time. It's an absolute pleasure to see it all. George, is it all Bader here? Does Benson have something to prove?
I thought Benson early on, but the guy's got such a great, compelling case. It all starts with the gold. When you're champ, not only does the prestige and the opportunities and the endorsements come with it, the money, and especially when you're a champ in those heavier weight classes, there's a lot riding on this. And let's not forget, Fedor wants Bader again if there's an opportunity there in case Bader fights. So that would be pretty epic, man, to dance with the last emperor one more time. But one thing I enjoy, guys, is these conversations with other hardcore fans where you discuss, like, who's the best in this division ever. And I remember for a long time we would have some good ones in the lightweight division before Habib came in and stole the show. He's probably the GOAT, obviously, at lightweight. But, you know, you would talk about BJ Penn, but Frankie Edgar beat him twice. Well, then Frankie Edgar. Well, Benson Henderson beat him twice. Well, then it's Benson Henderson, but Anthony Pettis beat him twice. But then you throw in Gilbert Melendez and Anthony Pettis and Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler and Eddie Alvarez. They've all won those multiple titles, and that's what I wanted for Benson Henderson, to be a WEC, UFC, and a Bellator champ. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, though.
I'm going to let you go over a little bit there because you're talking about a legend in Benson Henderson. Now, listen, I had some big fights this week in Bellator, man. I'm anxious to see how it goes. It's like I said, time waits for no man, but those dudes have both accomplished a lot in their careers, so excited to watch them compete. Well, guys, there is no UFC this weekend, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be a busy few days of MMA. You got one championship in Eagle FC on Friday. We got Bellator, CFFC I'm going to throw out there on Saturday as well. So let's give the casuals maybe something to sink their teeth into here, maybe outside of those Bellator big fights there. What's the one fight that you're most anticipating this weekend that you think others should probably be watching as well? Bill, let's put 4 minutes on the clock. You can kick it off.
Yeah, everybody that's followed me on Twitter knows I'm a bit of a heavyweight stan. I think the madness that is the heavyweight division is great. I know obviously sometimes it can backfire. We've seen our fair share of, championship round heavyweights leaning on the cage, and things can kind of turn south when that goes on. But I don't expect that in the Eagle FC main event between Sergey Karatanov and Tyrone Spong, which is my pick to watch this weekend. I know people probably thought maybe I'd be going with Bellator, but no, I think that fight is fun. Both those guys are vets of combat sports. Obviously, Karatanov has a lot more experience in the MMA department than Tyrone Spong, but Spong's a guy that I think we've been hoping to see more of over the years, right? He's had his kind of dips into MMA and just never really seems to gain some momentum, but he's clearly skilled. He's obviously an awesome striker, and I'm really excited for that. And just in general, I'm interested to see what Eagle FC can provide for fans. I think the more promotions that pay fighters well and provide these what seems like pretty solid matchups between notable names, both notable prospects and notable veterans, I'm here for it. I'm excited for that main event.
Yeah, right. I mean, just stylistically, it should be a lot of fun no matter what happens, right? But you got that speed of Tyrone Spong and obviously his greatness. Karatanov is just a big dude. I mean, that's going to be a fun main event. George, what about you? What's a fight people should be paying attention to this weekend?
Well, usually I like to tune into CFFC, LFA, Titan, a lot of these promotions, especially towards the end in the main event, for a reason, because usually along with winning the main event, there's either a title involved or there's a chance for you to go to the next level. So I usually gun for those types of fights to answer questions like this. But we recently talked to Ray Borg, who's fighting on the Eagle FC 44 card that Nolan was talking about. And he was telling us how his opponent, Cody Gibson, there's talk of if he wins, then he can possibly start to there's a path for him to get back to the UFC. And of course, Ray Borg, who had a acrimonious departure with the UFC, he had those weight cut issues, personal problems, withdrawing from fights. He seems to have addressed it. At least that's what he told us. And I get it. That's going to be hard to believe. You gotta step on the scale and prove it to us. But he seems anxious to want to steal that from Cody Gibson, steal that opportunity. And that right there just got me involved. So that's what I want to tune into is Cody Gibson versus Ray Borg at 135 pounds over at Eagle FC. I think it's going to be a great fight. I'm just a fan of the lighter weight classes, especially that bantamweight division.
Yeah, especially when you look at two good guys, too, that are trying to make their way back to the UFC, right? That's a very, very intriguing matchup. And you get bonus points for using the word acrimonious. That was stellar there, all right? Matt, round it out for us. What's another fight we should be looking forward to this weekend?
Well, I guess we're all Eagle FC shills over here because I'm sticking with this fight card too, and it's a guy that we all know and love very well. Rashad Evans, former UFC light heavyweight champ. I want to see him go out there and get a win. It's been 8 years since his last win, and I hope he can go out there and get it done, man. He's fighting a guy that is going to be a very grapple heavy affair. So it could be not the most exciting fight in the world, but hopefully it's one where Rashad can show up, lean on his wrestling skills and go out there and get it done. I'm also just outside of the matchup itself. I'm also just really intrigued to see how this whole fight card, comes off across the screen. The production values and all that kind of stuff. Is this going to be something that really sticks around, for Habib running his promotion? How's it going to look? Is it really going to make an impact in the MMA landscape? I hope it does. I'm all for new promotions and, new fresh things that really stick around and provide some opportunities for fighters that they can really benefit from. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Not only the Rashad Evans return, hopefully he gets his hand raised, but also how does this event as a whole come off?
Yeah, listen, man, they put together an intriguing card down there. There's no doubt about it. So I'm anxious to see how it all plays out. We'll have Danny Segura on hand down there in Miami, Florida to bring you coverage at MMA Junkie. Hey, let me just throw out there for CFFC. Obviously, I'll be on the call on UFC Fight Pass, but great main event with Aaron Jeffrey and Rex Harris with the middleweight title on the line. But George, you like these prospect matchups? Tune in for Paul Capaldo versus Jose Perez as well, man. That is two legit blue chip prospects going at it. So I'm anxious for that one. Guys, as we said, no UFC this weekend, but Bellator, One Championship, Eagle FC, CFFC, it's all in action. There's a lot happening right now. We'll talk about it all next week on Spinning Back Clique.